Hello, my name is Gary Mansfield, and this is the Ministry of Arts podcast, where each week I'll be speaking to a different artist. Now let's begin by bagging these bongos.
Yeah, right. Crazy.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast, episode 237. Today I'm taking you to meet Joelle Taylor. She's an award-winning poet, playwright, author and editor. And this week she's able to add curator to that list. I first met Joelle about 5 or 6 years ago at the Poetry Cafe in London, where I was giving just a very short talk at a spoken word evening, which Joelle was headlining. And I've got to say, Joelle's performance properly blew me away. For many years, Joelle has gone into prisons to do poetry workshops and been a judge for Koestler Arts' annual exhibition at the Royal Festival Hall. Well, this year, she's been asked to curate the exhibition. Previous curators have been Speech to Bell, Benjamin Zephaniah, who are both poets and spoken word artists. From the visual art world, there's been Anthony Gormley, Sarah Lucas, Grayson Perry, last year, Ai Weiwei, of course. If you've never been to one of these Koestler Arts exhibitions, I urge you to go. Not only because I'm a trustee of that charity, but it is one of the most powerful exhibitions you'll ever attend. It's always just full of love, empathy and hope. And I should add, for me personally, whenever the curator is a non-visual artist, they always seem to bring something a little extra to the table. So I'm really looking forward to see what Joelle has in store. She's titled the show In Case of Emergency, and it runs from the 2nd of November to the 17th of December. So if you're in London on the run up to Christmas, head down there, you'll love it. So rather than me give away any more of this episode, come and listen to the person herself, Joelle Taylor. There you are.
See you
How
again.
are you?
Yeah, good.
Yeah, I like your... Is it posters over the back there or just...
Oh yeah. So the Dyke one, that was what do you call it?
A placard.
Yeah, placard. That's
Brilliant.
it. It was, I can't remember if it was a trans rights march or
Is it yours or
it
you
was
just got
somebody
it from
else's, and they
Yeah.
left it round my house, and I was like, I want
there?
it.
Acquired it.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And how are you on this strangely warm autumn day?
It's really weird. I haven't been able to work out what to wear. I'm tutoring this afternoon, and I'm wearing this like tweed suit. Basically, no matter what happens, Gary, I continue as though no weather has changed, nothing's happened. I just keep walking through life like that.
Brilliant.
In a tweed suit, tweed bikini, no teeth.
Joelle, I've got several questions that I ask each guest.
Okay.
So the first one, how would you explain what you do to someone that may not know your work?
I'm an author, poet, thinker, and performer.
Brilliant.
So I generate ideas. The ideas become either poems or novels or plays. And then I work really hard to get those into a state where other people can access them. I believe poetry has purpose. I'm primarily known as a poet. And I believe poetry has purpose. It's a verb. It's a doing word. So when I write a poem or a poetry collection, it's not just about a random selection of poems on a page. It's themed. And along with the book, I have a project that will run. So a huge commitment on my part is toward community, that filthy C word that Thatcher's government erased the sense of community. And through that, I lead masterclasses and workshops to enable people to be able to write their own stories. That's essentially what I do.
Well, I've discovered myself when I was in prison, and I know you do a lot of work in prisons, and we'll come to that. 2 ways that most people would try to be creative would be storytelling and poetry, because you can do both with the minimal equipment being a pen and paper, which all prisoners have access to.
Yeah.
And then that starts that creative process,
Yes.
sows that seed, and then that just grows.
Yeah. I mean, I think crucially the thing about being able to write in prison, whether it's short stories or poetry, is that the inmate owns the work 100% and completely. You know, they might not own the pen or even the piece of paper, but they can memorize the work. They own it. It's something, I call it the last free art, you know, because there are all kinds of cases of inmates creating 3D pieces of work or visual art in prison, and it doesn't belong to them. You know, it belongs to the system, which is, I think, quite a unique situation in the UK. With poetry, you know, the only prison you have is your own mind, and you have to break through it. Break through. When you open a page, a blank piece of paper, the first thing I say to generally men is, you know, that's the escape tunnel. There it is, right there. Now pick up your pen. It's a shovel. Start digging. See you on the other side. You know, it's a pull to. I've seen remarkable things, and I say mainly men because obviously something like, I mean, don't get me wrong, you'll probably know, something like 95% of the prison estate is male. So when I generally meet men in a writing workshop, the first thing I notice is the journey that took them there. And if you dig down, if you really start to develop a relationship with these men, you discover that they were all in care. They were all in pupil referral units. They were all in youth offenders, and now they're all in prison. And there's a remarkable thing that happens when these people, who have to be by necessity watchful, wary, closed, you know, aggressive in some manner, they've got to use their physicality to protect themselves. You'll see a moment where they crack and they realize that they never had a chance. But this is the chance, this workshop, this moment. So write out your life story. Now change your life story, rewrite it, do it in a different way. Now start using your imagination. Now, next thing you know, these guys are addicted to each other's work because they get to, as well as creating their own works, a really vital part of it is empathy. Roger Robinson, the poet, calls poems small empathy machines. And that means you're sitting in a group of maybe 15 guys, like some might be on your wing. Generally, they're all from all over the place. You don't really know them or haven't had a conversation. It's all very tense. And suddenly they start to open like little flowers toward each other. They'll hear a guy stand up and he'll say, and they feel comfortable enough to go, whoa, that image, you know, it's not just like, whoa, your life has been really tough, bruv. It's about the techniques that they're using. It's about the way, the wide cinema of poetry, you know, that they're able to do that. And you see this over a course, that these men and these women start believing themselves and start believing they can move forward and do things and understand other people's perspectives, you know.
As you was just mentioning there about empathy, I discovered a little too late, but quite a while ago, that was my key to creativity. I know it sounds a bit like a George Benson song here, but once I had a little bit of empathy and understanding and allowed myself to pat myself on the back a little bit, rather than just look down on myself, then I started doing that with other people as well, you know. And once I had that little bit of understanding, that was a good thing. But empathy was the main thing. That was the word that I'd been looking at in my visual art. I was trying to look for a word that brings everything together. And I was watching telly once, and there was a guy talking about his book on empathy. And then I was like, fuck, that's the word. That's the thing that pulls all of mine together.
Gary, all of it is about that. They're not just poems being small empathy machines, but the whole of art is a bridge toward another person. It's about connection, and that connection goes both ways, you know. So in terms of what I've seen, certainly, you know, curating the Koestler, but just generally in prisons, is this it's an incredible resurrectionist kind of moment where these people realize that there's these whole worlds inside them, you know, and it is based in empathy. It's based in, like you say, empathy, forgiving ourselves a little bit. Because definitely. As you know, when you first go into prison, I was really startled at first in my initial workshops, first years, about how seeking forgiveness, all the writing is. It's all very redemptive work. You know, I'm sorry. And that actually, I think, is a barrier to recovery and rehabilitation, because it's almost like you're holding up. Yeah, I'm sorry. I said I'm
It's
sorry.
a white flag. You're holding up a
No.
white flag to society, sort of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but the next stage on is going like, well, why did I do that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, but I can break this cycle. I can do this, because if I can rewrite a story now, a really great exercise to do is write your life story. Now change it, write it again differently.
Brilliant.
Don't just be the opposite. Take a difference. Instead of going left, go right, and see where logically that takes you. And in doing that, you're quite right. All these little connections between people are made, and you start to understand your life.
Yeah.
A little
and
bit.
Most of the time, Joe, you can trace it back to a junction where you went left when you should have gone right.
Yes.
And then you've made that initial mistake, and then it's just a snowball of trying to deal wrongly with that mistake.
If you're from a background where this is expected, you don't get any second chances.
Yeah.
You really, really don't. And we know, like, there's an overrepresentation of Black people throughout the whole prison system, for example.
Yeah.
We know that a good 99% are from economically challenged backgrounds. We're working class people, and you start to realize then, when you look at that background, that other people do get chances. If you're from the right part of the town, if you're white, if you've got a father who's part of a banking system, and this is really out of character for you, Daryl, it can be really out of character for Daryl about 3 or 4 times before anything serious happens. Do you know what I mean? But if you're Kevin from the ends, it's expected. Your brother's already in prison. You walked out of school because you've got undiagnosed, autism or ADHD or something like that, or because you're trauma-induced ADHD because of the kind of background you live in. None of these people get a second chance.
Yeah. And it's and they feel sort of guilty for asking for one, as if they're not entitled to it even.
Yeah, and the whole
because they've had a lifetime of knockbacks.
Indeed, all of that, and also there's something emasculating about asking for help.
Yeah.
When men are cornered, generally speaking, they'll just put up a front. It's the best defense, I guess.
Yeah.
You're not singular either. You're part of an entire community of traumatized kids who are misbehaving and stealing, and who are sold, every expensive digital thing on the planet via their social media, things they can never afford. They're just little capitalists. All the gangs are just little CEOs,
they've got a pair of trainers that's worth more than my car.
Exactly. So it's very difficult. It's very difficult, even on release, to not fall back into it, because that's the survival mechanism of this particular community.
Can we take you back to you growing up? Was there any of the arts or even poetry in your home growing up?
No. I mean, I'm from a sort of, what would you call, decent, lower class, working class family. What I did have that lots of other families didn't have is my parents read a lot. They were reading like horror novels and sci-fi, but it meant there was always something to read. But in terms of poetry and theatre and opera, obviously, or any of or dance, anything like that, no, absolutely not. So I did, I learned how to write by going to the local library and reading, and carrying on the stories. And then I got really into punk, and I wanted to be a lead singer in a punk band, but I'm really bad.
So did your poetry start with lyrics?
Yeah, started with lyrics printed on sleeves. So in the punk movement, so this is really, for me, I entered it in the early 80s, like 1980, 1981. So late, I'm a younger generation than the original punks. All the good stuff had the lyrics printed on the sleeves, which is really sad that can't be accessed now, because it was not just a listening experience, it was a reading experience. And there are often lots of great photographs and backstage stuff, which was really exciting to see your band hanging in the dressing room, and then these incredible lyrics. And there's a band called Crass that I was particularly into, and they were basically, very early spoken word poems over a bit of noise and just everybody shouting together. Chumbawamba obviously were of that ilk as well, but they're a bit
Yeah.
more poppy. They're a bit more kind of bit less anarchist probably than Crass. Crass was a movement really. In anarchy, and the lyrics were really profound, and not just the lyrics, the ideas. Like I remember Feeding the 5,000 was an album they had, and there was there was a record they'd released which was called something like Shaved Women or something like that, which to us now is like a nothing kind of conversation. But then in sort of late 70s, 80s, it was shocking. And so the record company, I might have got the song wrong, but the record company refused to release it. So Crass paid for their own, but instead of putting this song on it, they called it The Sound of Free Speech. It was a blank EP, you know? So it wasn't just the writing, it was the concepts, the ideas, and the sense of resistance and confrontation. And it introduced me to feminism. It introduced me to the idea of gay rights, lesbian and gay rights, and the anti-apartheid movement. So even though I was from the ends, access was provided via, records, definitely. And because I was reading anyway, I just followed, what my my heroes were reading. So suddenly I'm reading George Orwell, and I hear Baudelaire, I can't even say Baudelaire. Do you know what I mean? But it's such an important thing that people in bands, musicians can do, because they have the mass audience. They've got definitely all the youth part of society invested in them. Then it's to lead people a little bit, like, have you read Bell Hooks, or exposing them to different kinds of writers and different philosophies. And, the politics around the world. Punk was brilliant for telling us, from
there's something else going on,
Stiff Little Fingers. Yeah, things that holiday in Cambodia. I'd never heard of Cambodia.
Yeah.
And Pol Pot. But suddenly, all of the bands were talking about current affairs, essentially, and politics, and,
And although I'm going to sound like an old man here, Joelle, in the day that you're speaking of, so you had to go to a library or what have you to seek out that information, and because you're looking for something, you would find something else along the way as well, picking up this book, put that to one side.
Exactly. There's something about involving the body in the research, going out there and following a trail, and also that leads not just to the library, but it led to people meeting up. You'd look in your local paper, Accrington Observer and Times, and it would have, women's group meeting, Sharon's house, 7 p.m. Friday night. And then we'd all sit earnestly at Sharon's house with our legs crossed. I was always the youngest. They were all kind of lesbian feminists from the 70s. And I'd just sit there learning. People don't understand it's how a bad education really affects a person. We're all entitled to a good education. I was lucky because of my reading. Even though I was excluded from school, I got enough GCSEs, O-levels as it were, to go on eventually and go to college, get A-levels, and eventually from that to university. But, and while you're at university, I don't know if you've ever been, but one of the most shocking things is how hard you fight to get in. And then you meet posh people for the first time. You think posh people, but it's just people that cut crust off the Warburtons, not actually posh. So you get there and there's all these posh people who don't give a damn that they're at uni because it's so easy and so simple. And then they're just drinking every night and having a whale of a time. And obviously I, rude not to, I joined in where I could, but I didn't have the money really to do that. I couldn't go for dinner every night in a restaurant. I'd never been to a restaurant, but at the same time, the course is democratic in the sense that I am being told the same things that Hurrah Henry is over here, and it's what you do with that. And
what I discovered, Joelle, I was at the University of East London. We did have a few people who come from a more privileged background, but not a privileged background, But what I did notice was those that had the easier life had to go trying to looking for a bit of influence in their work, whereas the others just thought back to their 9th birthday or what
Yeah.
happened a few weekends ago, you know, what they
Yeah.
witnessed or something like that. So we didn't have to search for our influence. It was
No, I
there,
think you're completely right. And throughout poetry and spoken word, it's been a preoccupation as well. Is that if you think of two sides, very simplistic, but a binary, which is the middle class people, and then the people from the ends, the working class and the underclass people.
Yeah.
The working class, the underclass have got all the talent, and the middle class people have got all the technique. So basically, it's about coming together, isn't it? Between And that's why in the literary establishment, there's such a push against confessional poetry or stuff about my life, because the people who run the establishment haven't got the stories.
No.
You know, but that doesn't mean to say that that's enough. It's not enough a story. You need to know how to tell it. You know, it's not enough that you draw a cell, you know, and put it on the wall. There has to be some technique, some craft, some learning, some time spent on it, you know. So I think that's our project, really. I'm really interested in the bridge between the two spaces. Keeping all the heart and the passion and the stories, but learning how to tell them in the best way.
Where was it you grew up and went to uni?
Across Lancashire, but essentially Bacup, Burnley, Rottenstall, Blackburn, Padiham.
So how did you end up down this end?
It was the furthest away. It really was. When I looked at a map, and I did have a paper map, I looked because University of Manchester would have been great, but that's like 30 miles away.
Yeah.
Or something. So I'd be coming home a lot, and I was gay. And back then, I still am, by the way. And back then, it was pretty much like declaring yourself to be a paedophile. That's how people reacted to it. I know, and it really bad. And obviously everybody in my area knew, but there was only one of me, like that only gay in the village. That whole thing, you know, we laugh about, but was fucking stressful. So I just thought, if I go to Kent, which is kind of where part of my family's from. That was the other thing. My mum's mum was, you know, daughter of dockyard workers in Chatham, Kent.
Got you.
So, which was very mysterious to me, the South, being from the North.
Yeah.
It was really mysterious in 1980. So I decided to go to the University of Kent. I got in. Yeah, and then there was no chance of anybody popping in. I could be literally as gay as you see today.
Well, the good thing about going to a whole new area is that you can be more free, or you can be freer, but you can make your own little persona, if you like. You can bring out those bits of your personality that you've hidden forever. Yeah, you can be a different you.
Yes, I think that's really true. And it's very, I mean, most of my life has kind of been characterized by that, leaving and arriving in a new place and then leaving again. Essentially what I do, even my day-to-day work is, you know, I don't work in the regular place. Every day is a first day at work for me. Meet everyone for the first time. And then as my career's gone on, I do a lot of international traveling. So there's a sense of constantly reinventing the self and reconfiguring.
Yeah.
Though after a couple of glasses of wine, I just end up back where I started. Broken tooth, old pot-bellied leather.
Now, what you're saying there about attitudes towards gay people, I've said on here several times, I had that attitude towards gay people when I was growing up, of a similar time to yourself. In the early 80s, I weren't aware of anyone that was gay in where I come from, although it turns out there was, but I just didn't see them. So I was not anti-gay, I was just ignorant towards that area.
Yeah, I think it's just common. That was the prevailing attitude.
And it wasn't until, because I went into door work with security companies, you know, that sort of thing, and we got a contract with Heavens, and I went down there, and what a fucking learning curve it was for this guy. I say it off of this podcast all the time, the best club I've ever worked.
In my book, I wrote about heaven and going there dancing. I've taken LSD, and I'm wearing a pair of little rubber shorts, got my little skinhead, my big quiff, the big docks on,
Same here.
topless dancing like that, and then looking at the light, and I suddenly realised who's missing in the room.
Yeah.
You know, this rammed room. So it's a sense of it was like in the background. So all the kind of background characters start to wink off like candles in a church. And then suddenly it got really close, and it's my girlfriend's brother who dies. So I was aware of that at that time. But, you know, Derek Jarman wrote this brilliant line about AIDS, and he said, the world is ending and it is time to dance.
Yeah.
You know, which I think really summarizes that whole moment in history for gay people, for us anyway. And
I do feel that at the time I was there, and I know when everyone experiences something for the first time, that is what they feel was the moment for it. But it was them little bits of learning that made me enjoy that club and the people there so much. Yeah, it was a great time. Yeah, really was. And it's been, so as I've got older, I returned to that period of the 90s in particular as a kind of, well, it was when I was underclass, I was squatting. I would have probably died if it hadn't been for the wider lesbian and gay community at that time, particularly the dyke community, who kind of looked out for one another in really tangible ways. So it wasn't just a little bit of a conversation. It was, come and stay at my squat. Here's some food. Get your dole and then donate it to the squat, and then tomorrow she gets hers and she'll donate it. Yeah. So we all eat. Yeah. Yeah, we're all gonna eat, and everything else. You get my meaning? Do you know what I mean? And it was the beginnings of understanding community. So like when C+NTO Othered Poems blew up as a book and I won the big prizes, it was a really moving moment, not just for me, but for all of us who went through that period in history. It feels like it's not just me, but like the scene I was working with at the time got their flowers. Yeah. Everybody got their flowers in that moment. Yeah, that's nice. That's a nice way to look at it. And you've had a few accolades. So C+NTO and Othered Poems won the T.S Eliot Prize. Brilliant. That's the same as winning the Booker Prize. So it's huge and really transformative in terms of my career. But then the book also won the Polari Book Prize, which is for the LGBT books. And then I was awarded Spoken Word Artist of the Year by Saboteur. So that was fantastic. It was nominated for a bunch of prizes too. Yeah. Once you get the Eliot, it's like winning the Turner Prize for you. Once you've got that, you're not that bothered about winning the Winchester Art Prize. Do you know what I mean? And no disrespects to Winchester. No, man. But now I'm hungry. Now I'm like, if I do things you don't give me a prize, I'm going to get angry. Yeah. Do you know who I am? Well, I've got to say, talking about that, do you remember us meeting at the Poetry Cafe a couple of years ago? Right. Yeah. Little bit out of my comfort zone, and I had to get up and give a little bit about myself just for 5 minutes or so. When you got up and done your poetry, the way you done it was a different class. It was great. Oh, thank you. I mean, I've been doing it an awful long time. And, you know, the thing about all art is, you know, there's this thing about becoming authentic, or you're authentic. And we think you can do it originally. It takes a lifetime to be yourself, an absolute lifetime, because you're impersonating all the other artists that have ever impressed you, largely at the beginning because you think that's how art is done. Yeah. But then because you know you really connect with their style or whatever, and you don't even know you're doing it, but after years and years and years, finally you find your voice. You know, it's a strange thing. It's not how people think it is. Yeah. People think you've got it in the beginning, you know, but everybody starts off as impersonators. Of course. And that's the only, you know, you can only go by what you see around you, and everyone has done that in whatever creative field it is. Yeah. But this is why collectivity is the antidote to cultural fascism. That's why you need to form collectives of people who are like you and not like you. Yeah. So what really helped me in my career was joining Outspoken, where it's a small collective of artists, basically poets, writers, musicians, who put on a monthly night at the Southbank Centre, but it took us a decade to get there. The reason I really joined is because the other writers, Anthony Nexaguru in particular, are the most extraordinary
writers and thinkers and talkers, conversationalists,
Yeah.
provocateur. And it just meant that I was able not to rest anymore. Because if someone next to you is so curious about art and the world, you can't help it. You're like, okay, tell me. And then you start learning. And then, you know, it's not competitive. It's about pulling each other up, challenging one another. So if you have a group of artists, have people in the room who are better than you.
Yeah.
Work with people you think, you know, wouldn't even look at you. You know, because it's so easy, particularly in open mic scenes and whatever starting scene, it's so easy to just compare yourself to the person who's just gone on or the one afterwards.
Yeah.
You know, the person that you see every time. There's a real comfort in it. But in terms of your work, it will remain the same.
Yeah.
So, you know, unless you really push. And writing is about evolution. All art is. You know, it's not like, you know, pop stars are supposed to release their big hit by the time they're 20 and then try and replicate it for the rest of their lives.
Yeah.
We're not on that journey. We're a constant sense of evolution and tangents and sidetracks and back. And that's what's so beautiful about visual and written arts and performed arts, is that you are never there. There's always another corner you've got to get round before you arrive.
But there's a couple of spoken word artists that I've enjoyed. I mean, John Cooper Clarke has been there for me forever, you know. I don't even know where he takes me, but he makes me feel comfortable, warm and powerful at the same time, you know.
Yeah.
And Scroobius Pip, I've become sort of pals with Pip since, through podcasting, you know.
Yes.
But he was one that I enjoyed his music first. I got him the wrong way round. I discovered his music and then found out that he was a poet before that. But then I started listening to his poetry, who then introduced me to K Tempest and Polar Bear, because they were his pals, you know. And maybe about 6-7 years ago, I was walking down the end of Kingsland Road and there was an arch and it had this little, like you see in Italy, you might have a box on the side of a building and it'd have an image of Christ in there.
Yeah.
And I saw one of those and I thought, what's that on the wall? It's out of place, you know. And Kay had made up all of these little passports and they were stacked up in there, and in there was a little book of poetry.
Oh, wicked.
And it just really touched me that someone has gone through all of that effort in the hope that it would lighten up someone's day. And it definitely did mine. And as I say, that was maybe 7-8 years ago, and it's still in my bag now. Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting you chose those artists, because I think they represented another stage in UK spoken word, and that where it started to fill theatres and started to, well, now with K filling stadiums.
Brilliant.
I just did a gig with them a couple of months ago at Queen Elizabeth Hall's, 900 people. So, you know, going from like performing to 6 people in a boiled suite in the back room of a pub, and then suddenly Pip arrives and Polar Bear and K Tempest and Holly McNish, and they herald, you know, together this new uprising of spoken word, Anthony Nexaguru, all these people, and suddenly it becomes not the preserve of the middle classes anymore. It becomes this working class movement, educated working class movement, you know, which is now grown again, and it's a lot of kind of, it's more culturally democratic, the audiences and the people on stages. But
it's now become very middle class to be working class, you know.
To quote John Cooper Clarke, the one thing money can't buy.
And he does. When I say just how you said that, then whenever he comes on telly, I just go, John Cooper Clarke.
John Cooper Clarke. You know, I met him. I did a gig with him in Morecambe.
Brilliant.
And Leighton Kwesi Johnson, a couple of months last year sometime, and I spoke to John Cooper Clarke quite extensively. He's just the pun master. He's just like punning all the time. And he saw me in a suit and tie. He's like, "What won't you dress like that for?" And I was like, "I'm a lesbian, John, like my father." And I was really, really funny. So that was like a lifetime's dream. I made John Clarke snigger.
a great character, and there ain't many of those around, that's for sure, like him.
Sure.
Well, speaking of other artists, there is a question here that I ask each guest, and it is, if there was you and 5 other poets, spoken word poets, if there was you and 5 others, past or present, what would your ideal poetry festival be?
Oh my goodness. So Adrian Rich, Anthony Guru, Selena Godden doing spoken word. 2 more. Wilfred Owen.
Ah, nice.
Maybe T.S. Eliot. I'm getting really into the wasteland. It's such an incredible modernist masterpiece. It's astonishing.
And of course, did you use his pen
Yes, I
to
did.
sign in?
You know that? Yeah, I used his pen to sign fellow of the Royal Society of Literature, which is the video. I never put it up, the video, but I've never seen myself look that happy. I was like, I turned into like a big Labrador. It was an amazing.
I just remember seeing somewhere that it used to be a quill. Who did the quill used to belong to? They used to sign in with.
I'm not sure, but it could be Byron. There's a whole range of these incredible pens, which is overwhelmed. But I had to have Eliot because I just.
Did you have a choice?
I think they do have James Joyce.
No, sorry. That made me sound intelligent then. But no, did you have a choice?
You do have a choice, and they let you know what the choices are before you go. So you give some thought, and then they lay them all out in front of you. It's quite formal. And they have this massive old ledger, and then you sit at the table, and they have a couple of people, and then you ask for the pen. They pass it to you, and you know, and there's some really difficult pens there to work. So I was relatively simple. You know, it was just a fountain pen. But yeah, there's proper quills and things of people scratching, chipping graffiti. You know, it was a real moment for me.
It's other people acknowledging that you are one of those sitting on the shoulders of many.
Exactly, that's it. It's that profound moment when you're looking at the pens, and as you hold it, you pretty much know you're holding it in a similar way.
Yeah.
And all that thought came through that pen. And this is the pen they wrote, you know, War and Peace with. This is the pen they wrote Mill on the Floss. So all these kind of, the sense that all these masterpieces have filtered down this funnel of a pen is extraordinary, you know.
Did it entice you to go and buy a pen of your own to keep?
Oh, babe. I mean, did it entice me? I've been doing that since I was like,
well, I apologize.
9. So I've got loads and loads of fountain pens that I can use once, because I write in a weird way. I slope to the left. I'm right-handed, but I slope to the left. It's very small and very hard pressure. Okay. Like I'm trying to dig my way out of the world. So that means my fountain pens last 3.5 minutes. But they look beautiful, so I've got a little kind of display on my shelf.
So you've not got a chewed up Bic behind your ear most of the time.
No. The one unifying characteristic of all writers is we're always looking for pens. We're like, I know I should have a pen.
And an ink stain on your shirt.
You know what I mean? It's true. I find them on the back of my collar. Like, how do they get that? I must, like that drawing on the back of my neck. But yeah.
Brilliant. So bringing it back to sort of today-ish, you've mentioned at the start of this conversation that you've worked in prisons for many a while. How did that come about?
It was Pentonville Prison, and they were setting up this project about a slam poetry thing with the inmates. And the librarian there, I don't know if I'm allowed to name her, but she's astonishing. And so this was about, I don't know, 15 years ago. I can't remember exactly when. I just got a call because they wanted to know how to do a slam, and I was like the slam master. So I brought the idea of youth slam on a wide scale to the UK. So I was really well known for running slams, and so they invited me in, and obviously I was like, I didn't know what to expect. I knew they'd chosen me. The men had selected me. I think what they'd chosen is slam poetry.
Yeah.
And I just remember like standing up on the chapel on stage doing my stuff, The men going crazy. I started off with, like you asked for a lesbian. Well, here we are, mate. We're all like that on the outside now. Everyone's changed.
Brilliant.
It's not quite the porn image you were looking for. Sorry to disappoint. And then I did this gig. And I was very, very nervous because I didn't know how it was going to go down at all, but it went down like fire. Brilliant. And as the best kind of audiences, I've had some brilliant audiences in prison, because it's the work, particularly spoken word, not poetry, but spoken word requires energy and energy exchange. And things have kicked off. I was in Pentonville one time because I started being on this project. I called it Slamming the Slammer. It's like,
of course,
they'd set up, the library would set up these workshops, and I'd lead some, and other poets I've suggested would lead some others, and it would all lead toward this slam. And then guys would get invited to it. It's about enough space for maybe 100 to 200. And you wouldn't think it, all these hard men, would be in a room listening to poetry and losing their shit. There was one time at Pentonville where they were banging on the tables, and the tables are against the windows, which have wire in them,
Yeah.
And this guy just smacked the window and put his fist through. And that is enough. But what really impressed me was all the guys just looked at it and then looked back at the stage and carried on clapping.
Yeah, brilliant.
And looked at each other and went, ha ha ha.
Yeah.
And then for months afterwards, it was still there. They boarded it
Excellent.
up. But it was
excellent.
It was a moment of unity, and that's so important in prisons.
Yeah.
To get everyone together. And the simplest of poems, simplest bit of spoken word, and suddenly you've got all the guys really appreciating it. So when you go back on the wings, they know you in a different way.
Yeah.
I don't know exactly.
But it's like that out here, though, isn't it? When there's a collection of people who are all discovering something at the same time, you've all got something in common, and that chips away at that bloody brick wall that a lot of prisoners or even people out here have got. Once you chip away a few of those bricks and start letting in a bit of sunlight from someone else, it's always a good thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. We go back to the empathy machines again, don't we?
Very much so.
So that's how it started. And then I've done a lot of work with Pentonville. Then I did some work with other projects in Holloway prison before it was shut down. And then I've traveled around quite a lot and visited, like, the women's prisons. There are very few in comparison. So, Brixton Prison, Wandsworth, Wormwood, Scrubs. I love the name of that prison.
It's great, isn't it?
It's like your heart would sink.
When we used to write to friends in there, we'd put woodworm scrubs.
Woodworm scrubs. Grendon is an interesting prison.
Yeah, I went there a little while ago, done a few workshops in there.
Yeah. So it's more like a psychiatric prison. It's about a therapeutic prison. Is that what they call it?
Therapeutic, yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to me how different all the prisons are. And I think particularly, in prisons like Grendon, they really have a focus on rehabilitation.
Yeah.
And art being something that provokes that, something that is both therapeutic and takes you out of your, the dark hole, the spiral you could fall into. Yeah.
That's what I'd always said to the guys when I go in, that doing anything creative, it takes you out of your environment and puts you in another world.
Yeah,
but
definitely.
Prisons and arts brings us to something that you're doing on the 2nd of November, when you've been invited by Koestler Arts to curate their annual exhibition at the Royal Festival Hall.
That's right. As far as I'm aware, on November 1st, it's the press opening, and on the 2nd, open to the general public. And it's been an absolute privilege. I'd volunteered for Koestler for several years. So I'd be one of the poets. There'll be 2 poets generally go in and look at all the writing from the prisons and, hand out the various awards. And it's a voluntary post. I did it over lockdown as well. And I always thought of the actual curation being really famous people, like I We has done it, So when they asked me, I was like, I'm famous.
I've written with T.S Eliot's pen, and now I'm doing the Koestler.
Look at me, girl, go. No, I mean, I think they have a real commitment to artists who are known for working with a community focus. you know, and people who have an interest in the criminal justice system and working with people within that. So it all came together, really, I think, for them. And it's been an astonishing process, and what a privilege, man. So,
and what have you titled it?
I've titled it In Case of Emergency.
Brilliant.
And then as a sort of silent subtitle, Break Glass.
Excellent.
Everything, all the artwork is, so what I get to do is create a theme, which creates a world for the exhibition, which has its own language.
Yeah.
So my whole thing is vitrines. So it's glass display cases.
Nice.
You know, as a metaphor for what's happening to you know, inmates.
Yeah.
But yeah, this idea, the stuff is behind glass, and it creates a different way of focusing and looking at the work. You know, it's something that must be preserved, but also as you go through the exhibition, without giving too much away, as you go through it, you'll pass different kinds of vitrines. So one is a sound dome. So
Nice.
the spoken word, only if you stand here will you be able to hear it. So it's these invisible barriers. There's going to be rooms kind of cordoned off, almost like they're, you know, contaminated in some way. So you have to break the seal to get into the room to access the work. And there's the sort of centerpiece I wanted was a big glass vitrine, sugar glass, with, you know, 100 pieces of artwork, or 50 in there, breaking out and then flying off into the ceiling. All of which is a great idea until we sort of realized that the idea was bigger than the artwork. And that's the point of an exhibition. Like, you're not actually the artist, well, calm down.
Yeah.
So just created sort of poetic metaphor, or the Koestlers did. They've been brilliant to work with because they know what their limitations are, and it excites them. You know,
Brilliant.
if they know that they've only got £2.50, they're like, wow, what can we do with it? What ingenuity are we going to have to use? What metaphors? How can we suggest the same thing you're seeing, but it's suggested rather than a physical reality? And I really like their solutions. I think they really worked hard on it. And when you first go in, it is overwhelming. I've been in the Koestler house, like, you know, several times, but this time walking in, you open the door and there's thousands of artworks stuffed in. Have you ever been in?
It's like many times. It's like when you see on a comedy film someone open a closet door and just a barrage of everything falls down on you.
Well, what you get when you curate, you get the sense that you open the front door and all these caged voices scream out, shout out, or whisper, or singing. You know, there is this sense that the presence of absence, you know. I mean, and you know, like the other silent subheading for In Case of Emergency is excellence. I really want that. It's not a pity exhibition. It's not a little voyeuristic attempt. So come and see what it's like for poor people. Not that, you know, it's much more about showcasing extraordinary artwork with extraordinary content, but with real craft attached to it, a real sense of evolution of the artist within it, which is amazing. And I really hope people can connect. Connection's a huge part of it. I've got a telephone in a vitrine that will ring, and what I wanted to do is to connect to an inmate who's going to talk about their artwork.
Brilliant.
You know, they'll be opposite something, or maybe they'll be spoken.
And is that possible?
We're figuring it out. I mean, it could be things like, you know, ex-offenders. Basically, my job is great. My job as a curator is to come up with ideas and select the artworks and the poetry that we're going to experience. Select the work.
I have an idea.
Then
figure it out for me.
Yeah, exactly. I talked to Brenda Barinti about this, you know, Lady on Chain.
Yeah,
I was like, so I've got this vitrine and there's you in it. Yeah, on a microphone. She was like, well, how long have I been doing that for? Like, just for 3 weeks. And we also thought about getting National Prison Radio. Always cover the exhibition. Get them inside a big glass box. Get them in. So, because something different happens when you're doing that with people. You know, I'd like a box that we can lock a child.
You'll end up in jail yourself.
With water. No, but I mean, what happens? Why are we separating? What we're saying is these people are far too dangerous to be among us.
Yeah.
But then you look at the actual crimes people are committing.
That person who hasn't paid his fine should be in prison.
Keep it away from the
Yeah.
rest of us.
Yeah.
So they're warnings, aren't they? A lot of inmates are warnings rather than what they've done is so horrific. And obviously there's a lot more violent crimes, sex crime in the male estate.
Yeah.
But I go into women's prisons and I just can't work it out.
Yeah.
Like some of the women, you're like, you've got learning difficulties. You didn't pay your TV license. Not only that, but you opened the bloody door, didn't you?
Yeah, exactly. It's bonkers, isn't it?
God. Yeah. So this artwork is a way of breaking the glass.
I mean, I should say a majority of the work is visual art. And a majority of the curators have been visual artists. But when it's not a visual artist, that's when it gets quite exciting for me, because the visual artists have done so many exhibitions themselves. They know what might set out a good exhibition. But when it's someone who hasn't done that, and they've got a blank canvas to work with. When Speech de Bell done hers several years ago, that was one of my favourites. And because it was just so unexpected. When it's Ai Weiwei, it's going to be intense. When it's Anthony Gormley, it's going to be quite sophisticated. Sarah Lucas, it's going to be a little bit dangerous and dirty, But when you have no idea what that person's going to do, it's exciting. And although the exhibition's on for like 6 weeks or something, it never gets any less exciting for me. And I go up there half a dozen times each.
Well, we'll have to meet up there and go for a coffee together, and maybe we'll get in a little glass box together.
Yeah, it'd have to be a fucking big glass box to fit me in it.
Come to the launch on November 1st because
I'm there.
We're going to do something interesting.
Yeah, I'm there that night.
I'm not quite sure what, but I've said yes to everything. So
yeah, will it involve glass?
Yeah.
How can anyone see what you're doing, be it website or social media?
So best way at the moment, I've just updated my website, www.joelletayler.co.uk. And on there, you'll find a link to another website called The Night Alphabet, which is the name of my debut novel coming out February next year. February 16th, Queen Elizabeth Hall. It's a 900-seater. You've got to get tickets. Bring like 899 friends, Gary.
If I had that many, I would do. And your Instagram, which I love the name of.
J Taylor Trash.
Beautiful. Right, Miss Trash.
Thank you.
I like the double-barreled name. Very sophisticated. Joelle, thank you very much for your time. I've absolutely loved it. And I'll see you on the 1st.
See you on the 1st. Bye-bye.
See you later. Ta-da. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. It's a podcast that's produced with the help of the listener. And if you like what you've heard and you think you might be able to give a little support, there's 2 ways in which you can do it. If you go over to the Ministry of Arts Instagram profile, you'll find a Linktree drop-down box. And in that box, you'll find 2 links. One is called Buy Us a Coffee, and it's pretty much that. You can make a one-off payment, the price of a cup of coffee. Or, if you're able and want to do it more long-term, you can become a Ministry of Arts Patreon, where you can sign up to support us on a monthly basis. And 100% of your support goes back into the podcast. And if you're not able to do that, that's absolutely fine. This content is free for everyone. But we would urge you to follow us on your socials and show us a bit of love that way. Either way, thanks for listening and see you next time. Ta-da.